What's going on, everyone? Today I just wanted to make a video to talk about the topic of complaining. And so we'll jump right in. Philippians 4:11-12 says, "I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." And so we're going to be talking about complaining because that's what Paul is getting at here in this verse. He's saying, no matter what situation you're in, be content there. And let's jump into it. If you're someone who complains a lot, if you feel discontent in a lot of different situations, this video will be perfect for you because we're going to jump right into how not to complain, what complaining looks like, what you can do to be more content in all of your circumstances. So first thing, what is complaining? The actual definition I have here, it says to express dissatisfaction or annoyance about something. So the general idea of complaining is we are dissatisfied with our circumstances. Whereas in the verse that we just read, Paul is saying, I have learned to be satisfied, content in all of my circumstances. So that's going to be really important to keep that definition in mind as we move forward here. The first thing I wanted to talk about was why we actually complain. So if we're thinking about this definition of we're dissatisfied or we're annoyed, we can think of complaining as coming from the root of pride. So part of the reason we complain is because we feel entitled to being satisfied in our situations. So we all have desires that we want in life, and we feel like if we don't get that, we're essentially dissatisfied. And so we say, I want this, I expect this, it's not going my way, I'm dissatisfied. And so what happens? Then we complain and we tell the people around us, man, look how dumb this was. I was driving on the road and this person cut me off. What you're essentially saying is, I expected my drive to be perfect. I expected no one to get in my way, to make me take extra time to get in the way of my plans, and someone did, and now I'm upset and I'm going to complain about it. I'm going to say that I'm dissatisfied about it, or that I'm annoyed about what happened. And the reason Paul is saying this is because it's not a godly thing. He's saying we should be content in any circumstance we're in, and this is because for a number of reasons. Number one, there's a verse in James that says, count it all joy when you face these problems of many kinds, because what it actually does in us is it produces character and perseverance, and God uses these things to better us. And so I'll get to that in a minute. But the second reason is complaining is not something that we see Jesus do. He never is upset about having to take extra time to heal people or to talk with people or to teach. He's not complaining about how hungry he is or the storm that's going on around him. He's always content with his daily bread, what the Father has given him. And the reason that's so important is because that grateful heart actually allows us to receive more of God in our lives. When we're focused so much on what we're not getting, that is actually going to cause a lot of problems in our heart, because we're going to think, okay, God's not providing enough for me, God's not coming through enough, and that can hinder our faith. So complaining is a really important thing to address. So let's jump into how we can stop complaining so much, how we can learn to be more like Paul and be content in every circumstance. The first and the biggest thing, this is so huge, is gratitude. So a lot of people, let me talk about myself actually. For me, I used to be so ungrateful about everything in life, and I didn't really start practicing gratitude until about maybe 2 years ago now. And in the beginning, I couldn't think of anything I was really grateful for. I felt like I deserved everything I had. I felt like I'd earned my place in life, and everything around me was, if it wasn't meeting my standards, then it was just a bad thing. It wasn't my fault. I was doing good and everything else sucked. But I learned to start practicing gratitude because I found I wasn't grateful about anything, and I knew, okay, I should probably be grateful about some things. And when I started doing this, it completely changed my mindset about life in general. And so now all of a sudden I felt like, whoa, I should be I am so thankful for all the things I get to spend time doing. I'm so thankful for all the things that God has blessed me with. And it took time, it wasn't instant. But over time I started to realize, wow, God has given me so many things, And what this did for me with regard to complaining is when the difficult seasons of life came, I could actually now see that God was working in those. And so instead of being entitled and saying, okay, life is really difficult, God, I want you to fix this and come through and solve this problem, I could see, whoa, even in the middle of this, I can be content with where I'm at, just like Paul is talking about, because I have everything that I need, and I have so much more than I need because God has blessed me so richly. And that can even go for difficult seasons where it feels like God has withdrawn from you. Practicing gratitude can be a way to really focus in on what God has still left you with in that season. And that might be whatever it is, from a bed to sleep in when a lot of people might not have that, or the food that you're eating, or the weather outside, or even just a beautiful sky one day. And so finding little things to be grateful for is the absolute biggest thing that helped me to stop complaining, and it will certainly be an amazing step for you. If you're not practicing gratitude, it will make a huge difference for you to be more content in wherever you're at in life. And just one quick way on how to do that, try writing like 3 things down. At any point throughout the day, just sit for a second, take 1 minute and write 3 things you're grateful for down. And they can be so small, or they could be big, whatever it is, but just be specific and write those 3. And that will help you a lot in reaching this thing that Paul is talking about, being content where you're at. Number 2 is listen to the Holy Spirit. And so the reason I say this is because what I inferred about James, the passage in James, when we listen to the Holy Spirit, we can actually, instead of being upset about our situations, we can see a new way to interpret our situation. So like I was saying, James says, count it joy when you experience these bad circumstances that you're in. Count it joy when you're going through that hard season or that difficult thing in that relationship, because it produces something in you. So instead of complaining, we listen to the Holy Spirit and we hear the Holy Spirit saying, you can actually use this to grow in your likeness to Jesus. You don't need to, not only do you not need to complain, you can actually be grateful for the difficult situation, because God is using this to make you more like Jesus. And so that reframing, when we hear the Holy Spirit, when we quiet our lives down enough to be able to focus on that, we can actually hear the Holy Spirit saying, no, I've put you here. We can hear God saying, I've put you here in this situation because I want to do something in you. And so that's really important to pay attention to as well, because that's something Paul was probably doing really well, was hearing what God's will was in his difficulties, instead of just saying, this is way too difficult, I don't want anything to do with this, I'm going to complain, I'm going to be annoyed by being in prison right now. But he said, no, I'm going to be joyful because my suffering is making me more like Jesus. So that's number 2. Try and listen to the Spirit and think about reframing your situation. Say, is God actually using this to make me more like him? The last thing here is getting okay with not getting your way. So in other words, getting more comfortable being uncomfortable. To go back to what I said in the beginning, it's all about when we're complaining, we're dissatisfied with what we expected to be our way. But what happens when you practice not getting your way? What happens if now something gets in your way and you just don't care because you've beforehand practiced not caring? So my advice here is, the reason we're complaining is because of this entitlement. Let's practice doing things that we don't want to do, so that when someone takes away what we want, or when someone gets in the way of what we want, we've already been there. We've already sat in that space in practicing, and that has actually literally changed us to be okay with our circumstances, because we've practiced putting ourselves in bad circumstances, and what that does is it just completely reshifts the whole situation. And now you're not saying, oh, I'm so annoyed by what happened. You're saying, that happens I do that to myself even. I'm sacrificing and denying myself certain things. And maybe, for example, let me just think of something here. You could practice driving slower. Instead of just always trying to get to your place a little bit quicker, you could practice going the speed limit. And that's a really good way of slowing down, sure, but it's also a good way of challenging yourself to say, I want to move at this pace. I want to get there on my time, instead of just slowing down and doing what comes more naturally. So those are 3 things that I just wanted to talk about. I think complaining is a big thing in today's culture. We are so quick to say, that's not what I wanted and I'm mad about it, I'm going to tell people about it. But Paul is saying, the opposite. He's saying, I've actually learned to be content in every circumstance. I'm comfortable wherever I'm put. If God puts me high, if God puts me low, I'm good there because I have the Holy Spirit. I'm grateful for the blessings He's imparted on me, and I have done this so much that I'm used to it now. So you don't want to be that person who complains. Try these things. Let me know if any of those are helpful for you. They're just some of the things I've been thinking about this week. So try them, let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.